15-year-old Amari Bellwether adjusted the strap on her backpack and stepped out of Northridge High, just as the afternoon sun began its slow dip behind the oak trees lining the street. The air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement, typical late spring in the city. She walked with a steady rhythm, the soft click-clack of her prosthetic legs blending into the background noise of school letting out. Laughter, bike bells, the occasional car horn. She'd long since stopped noticing the sound herself, but sometimes strangers did. Their eyes would flick down, then quickly back up like they'd accidentally glimpsed something private. Amari had learned to ignore it. She had more important things on her mind, like the robotics competition next week where her team's prototype for a low-cost prosthetic knee joint was finally ready for testing. She wasn't in a rush. Her dad usually picked her up, but today he had a faculty meeting, so she was taking the bus. The stop was only 3 blocks away, past the corner store and the old laundromat with the flickering neon sign. She liked this walk. It gave her time to think, to replay lines of code in her head or imagine how she'd explain torque ratios to the judges without sounding like a textbook. Halfway there, a patrol car rolled up beside her, moving slower than traffic. She didn't think much of it. Police cars were common in this part of town. But then it pulled over, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. The door opened. Officer Dale Mercer stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes completely. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, one hand resting on his utility belt, watching her. Amari stopped walking. She knew better than to keep moving when an officer was looking at you like that. She'd been taught that early, not just by her dad, but by every black adult she'd ever known. Make yourself small, be polite. Don't give them a reason. Afternoon, she said, voice calm, hands visible at her sides. Mercer didn't return the greeting. You live around here? He asked, his tone flat. Couple blocks that way, she said, nodding toward her street without pointing. You go to Northridge? Yes, sir. He stepped closer. We got a call about a suspect matching your description. Stole a laptop and some headphones from TechStop about 20 minutes ago. Amari blinked. I just left school. I was in robotics club until 4. Got ID? She reached slowly into her backpack, keeping her movements deliberate. Student ID, okay? He took it, glanced at it, then handed it back without a word. But he didn't step away. Instead, his gaze dropped to her legs, the sleek carbon fiber prosthetics she'd saved up for with birthday money and summer coding gigs. They weren't flashy, but they were hers, custom fitted. She'd named them Astra and Lyra when she was 12 after Constellations. Those real? He asked suddenly. Amari stiffened. They're prosthetics, yes. You wearing them for show or you actually need them? The question landed like a slap. She swallowed. I was born without my lower legs. I need them to walk. He grunted like he didn't quite believe her. Then, without warning, he reached down and unbuckled the harness at her right knee. Amari gasped. What are you? Just checking, he said, yanking the prosthetic free. It clattered to the sidewalk. Stop, she cried, losing her balance. Her left leg buckled and she dropped to the pavement, palms scraping against rough concrete. People on the sidewalk slowed, some pulling out phones, but no one stepped forward. Mercer didn't help her up. He grabbed the second prosthetic, unbuckling it with rough efficiency. Now she was sitting on the curb, legs folded awkwardly beneath her, completely stranded. Her face burned, not just from pain, but from the sheer humiliation of being stripped of something so personal, so necessary in front of strangers. These could be hiding something, he said, holding both prosthetics like they were evidence. Gonna need to inspect them. They're medical devices, Amari said, voice trembling but clear. You can't just take them. I can if I suspect contraband. There's nothing in them. They're hollow shells with motors and sensors. Stay put, he cut in, already walking back to his cruiser. He tossed the prosthetics into the trunk like they were trash bags. Amari's breath came fast. She tried to push herself up, but without her legs, she couldn't stand. She scooted back until her spine hit the brick wall of the laundromat, hugging her knees to her chest. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. Crying wouldn't help. It never did. A woman in a floral dress hovered nearby, phone raised. You okay, honey? She asked softly. Amari nodded, though she wasn't. Can you
call my dad?
The woman hesitated, then dialed. Amari gave her the number from memory, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Officer Mercer returned, hands on his hips. You're not under arrest. Just a routine stop. You'll get your legs back after we check 'em. When? She asked. When we're done. He got back in his car and drove off, leaving her sitting on the sidewalk like something discarded. Minutes stretched. Cars passed. A group of kids from her school walked by, recognized her, then hurried on, eyes wide. One muttered, "That's messed up," but didn't stop. Amari stared at the spot where her prosthetics had disappeared into the trunk. Without them, she felt naked, exposed, like someone had reached inside her and pulled out a piece of her dignity. She thought about the first time she'd walked with these legs, how her dad had knelt beside her in the rehab center, tears in his eyes, whispering, "Look at you go." She thought about the hours she'd spent calibrating the microprocessors, tweaking the gait algorithm until it felt natural. These weren't just tools. They were part of who she was. Now they were in the trunk of a cop who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. The woman with the phone crouched down. "Your dad's on his way. Said he'll be here in 10. Amari nodded again, throat tight. She didn't trust herself to speak. 10 minutes later, a dark sedan screeched to a halt. Elias Bellwether jumped out before the car fully stopped, his dress shoes hitting the pavement with a sharp click. He wasn't in uniform. He hadn't worn it since retiring from the army, but he moved like he still was. Shoulders back, jaw set, eyes scanning the scene with military precision. When he saw his daughter on the ground, something in his face fractured. But he didn't yell, didn't curse. He just knelt, opened his arms, and said, "Amari." She collapsed into him, finally letting the tears fall. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other already pulling out his phone. "Who did this?" he asked, voice low. She pointed to the empty street where the patrol car had been. "Officer Mercer. Said I matched the suspect. Took my legs like they were nothing." Elias didn't say another word. He carefully lifted her into the car, wrapped a blanket around her, and drove straight to the police station. Inside, the air was stale, buzzing with fluorescent lights. A bored desk sergeant barely looked up when Elias demanded to speak to someone in charge. It took 20 minutes and 3 escalating requests before a lieutenant appeared, clipboard in hand. "We're reviewing the incident," he said, avoiding eye contact. Officer Mercer followed protocol. "Protocol allows stealing medical equipment from a 15-year-old? Elias asked, voice dangerously calm. "It wasn't stolen. It's being processed for what? She's a high school student. She has an alibi. She was in a supervised club with 12 witnesses." The lieutenant shifted. "Look, sir, I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," Elias interrupted. "I'm documenting." He pulled out a small notebook, the kind he'd carried in Iraq, and began writing. Time, date, names, badge numbers, quotes. Every detail. He'd learned long ago that in systems built to forget, paper remembered. Amari sat silently beside him, arms crossed, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. She felt small again, but not powerless. Not yet. Outside, the video the woman had filmed was already spreading. By nightfall, it would have thousands of views. By morning, tens of thousands. But in that moment, all Amari knew was the cold weight of absence where her legs should be. And the quiet, steady presence of her father beside her, writing down the truth, one word at a time. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The world was about to hear her name, and when it did, it wouldn't forget. The drive home from the police station was quiet, too quiet. Amari sat curled in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring out the window as streetlights flickered past. She hadn't spoken since they left. Her father kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the gear shift, his knuckles white. He didn't push her to talk. He knew better. Some silences needed space to breathe before they could turn into words. Inside their small brick house on Elmwood Lane, the familiar smells of coffee and old books usually brought comfort. Tonight they felt distant, like echoes from another life. Elias helped Amari onto the couch, then disappeared into the back room, the one he used as an office, and returned with a folded emergency mobility kit, a lightweight cushion, a pair of temporary stubbies she hadn't used in years, and a charging cable for her prosthetics control module. He'd kept it all just in case something like this ever happened. "Can I get them back tomorrow?" Amari asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to make sure of it," he said, but his eyes said more. "This isn't over." He made her tea, chamomile with honey the way she liked it, and sat beside her, not too close, not too far. "You did everything right today," he said gently. "You stayed calm. You gave your name. You asked for help. That took courage." She nodded, but her hands trembled around the mug. "He looked at me like I was broken, like I didn't belong on the sidewalk." "You belong everywhere," Elias said firmly, "and no badge gives anyone the right to make you feel otherwise." Later that night, after Amari finally fell asleep on the couch, still in her school clothes, still clutching the blanket, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. The video was already online. Someone had posted it on a local community page with the caption, "Cop takes disabled black teen's legs for no reason." Comments poured in, some angry, some supportive, some cruel. One read, too, "She probably stole something. Cops don't just do that for fun." Elias closed the tab. He wouldn't let the noise drown out what mattered. He started drafting an official complaint. Not emotional, not dramatic. Just facts: time, location, officer's name, badge number, witness accounts, violation of department policy, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. He cited legal codes like he was writing a lesson plan, clear, precise, undeniable. Then he called Ms. Delgado, the local NACP chapter leader he'd met at a school board meeting 2 years ago. She answered on the second ring. "Elias, I saw the video," she said before he could speak. "We're already drafting a statement." "I need more than a statement," he replied. "I need accountability. You'll get it," she promised. "But brace yourself. They'll try to bury this." He knew she was right. He'd seen it before in the military and academia, in every system built on layers of silence. But this time it was his daughter. And that changed everything. The next morning, Amari refused to go to school. "Everyone's seen it," she said, pulling the covers over her head. "They'll stare. They'll whisper. Let them," Elias said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "But you don't have to face it alone. I'll walk you in. And if anyone says anything, you tell me. Or Miss Chen, she's your robotics advisor, right? She'll stand with you." Amari peeked out from under the blanket. "What if they think I'm lying?" "Then they don't know you," he said simply. "And their opinion doesn't get to live in this house." At school, it was worse than she feared. Whispers followed her down the hall. A few kids avoided eye contact, but others surprised her. Mateo from Coding Club handed her a flash drive labeled Prosthetic Upgrade V2 for Amari only. Priya, who rarely spoke to anyone, left a note in her locker. "You're still the smartest person here. Don't let them forget it." And Ms. Chen pulled her aside after class and said, "If you ever need to step out, my classroom is always open." Still, Amari ate lunch alone in the library, scrolling through her phone to avoid looking up. That's when she saw it. A local news article quoting the police department. "Officer Mercer acted within protocol during a lawful investigative stop. The prosthetics were temporarily secured for safety evaluation." "Safety evaluation?" she muttered, showing the screen to her dad when he picked her up. Elias's jaw tightened. "They're rewriting the story before we've even told ours." That evening, he reached out to someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, Laila Rostami, a journalist he'd met during his second deployment overseas. Back then, she'd embedded with his unit in Afghanistan, writing stories that actually showed the human side of war, stories that didn't reduce soldiers to headlines. She'd once told him, "If you ever need the truth told right, call me." He dialed her number. "Elias Bellwether?" she said, surprised. "It's been years. I need your help," he said. And he told her everything. Lila listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "Send me the video. The complaint, everything. I'll be in town by Friday." Meanwhile, the online backlash grew uglier. Trolls flooded Amari's old social media posts with comments like, "Fake disability for attention," and "Daddy's playing the race card again." She deleted her accounts. But the damage lingered. She stopped sketching prosthetic designs in her notebook, stopped humming while she worked. The spark that usually lit her up when she talked about engineering had dimmed, Elias noticed. One night he found her sitting on the back porch staring at the stars. "Remember why you named them Astra and Lyra?" he asked, sitting beside her. She nodded. "Because they help me reach the stars. Even when I can't stand on my own." "You still can," he said. "This didn't take that away. It just tried to." She leaned into him, silent for a long time. Then, What if they never give them back? They will, he said. And if they don't, we'll build better ones. But deep down, they both knew it wasn't really about the prosthetics. It was about being seen as a person, not a problem. As a girl with dreams, not a suspect with legs that looked different. On Friday, Lila arrived. She didn't come with a camera crew or a microphone, just a notebook, a recorder, and quiet eyes that missed nothing. She spent hours talking to Amari, not just about what happened, but about who she was, her love for robotics, her frustration with how few prosthetics were designed by people who actually used them, her dream of starting a nonprofit to help kids like her access affordable tech. She's not a victim, Lila told Elias later. She's a voice, and the world needs to hear it. The police department, sensing the tide turning, held a press conference. Chief Dunleavy stood at a podium flanked by union reps and repeated the same line. Officer Mercer followed procedure. An internal review is underway, but this time people weren't buying it. Community groups organized a vigil outside the station. Local veterans posted videos saying, "This is not what service looks like." Even some officers, off the record, expressed discomfort. Then, a breakthrough. A clerk from TechStop came forward with security footage showing the real suspect. A white teenager in a hoodie, caught on camera stealing the laptop at 3:45 p.m., while Amari was still in robotics club, clearly visible on the school's hallway cameras at 3:50. The timeline didn't just clear Amari, it exposed the lie. Elias printed the footage timestamps and walked them into the police chief's office himself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand. He simply placed the papers on the desk and said, "You have a choice now. You can protect a man who broke the law, or you can protect the oath you swore to uphold." The chief didn't respond, but for the first time he looked uneasy. That night, Amari barely touched her dinner. She pushed peas around her plate, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" Elias asked. "I keep thinking, what if no one had filmed it?" She said quietly. "What if I was alone? Would anyone have believed me?" He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I would have always." She looked up, eyes glistening. "But what about everyone else?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Maybe that's why we have to keep talking. So next time, someone will believe." Later, as she lay in bed, Amari opened a new notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "Design specs for Project Phoenix, prosthetics that can't be taken away." She didn't know if it was possible, but for the first time in days, she felt like trying. Downstairs, Elias sat at his desk, staring at a photo on his wall, him in uniform, holding a newborn Amari in the hospital. He'd promised to protect her then. He'd promise it 1,000 times more. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the city, a decision was being made, and for the first time, it wasn't being made in silence. The morning after the security footage surfaced, the air in the city felt different, charged, like before a storm breaks. Amari woke to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. News alerts, messages from classmates, even a notification from a national disability advocacy group offering support. She didn't check them all. Instead, she sat up, stretched, and reached for the temporary stubbies by her bed. They were clumsy and low to the ground, but they let her move. And today she needed to move. Downstairs, Elias was already on a call, his voice low but firm. "Yes, I understand internal affairs move slowly," he said, stirring coffee with one hand. "But the public doesn't have to wait for your timeline to see the truth." He hung up and turned as Amari entered the kitchen. "Morning," he said, softer now. "Sleep okay?" "Better," she said. And it was true. For the first time in days, she hadn't dreamed of concrete under her palms or the sound of a trunk slamming shut. At school, things had shifted. The whispers were still there, but they carried less weight. People looked at her not with pity, but something closer to respect. Mateo even joked, "If they try to take your legs again, I'll build you rocket-powered ones that fly away." Amari laughed, really laughed, and it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. But the real turning point came mid-morning, when Principal Hayes called her to the office. Amari braced herself. Was it another complaint? A disciplinary note? Instead, she found Lila Rostami waiting, notebook in hand, along with a woman in a crisp navy suit. "Amari," Lila said warmly, "this is Dana Whitmore from the Civil Rights Division. She's here to listen." Dana didn't ask leading questions. She didn't push. She just sat, took notes, and let Amari tell her story in her own words. The walk home, the officer's tone, the way her prosthetics were yanked away like they were nothing more than scrap metal. When Amari described sitting on the curb, helpless, Dana's eyes didn't flicker with skepticism. They held steady, full of quiet understanding. Afterward, Lila walked her back to class. "You were incredible," she said. "Clear, honest, powerful," Amari shrugged. "I just told what happened." Sometimes that's the bravest thing anyone can do. Meanwhile, the police department scrambled. Officer Mercer had been placed on administrative leave, officially for policy review, though everyone knew it was damage control. The union issued a statement calling him a dedicated officer, unfairly targeted by misinformation. But cracks were forming. 2 junior officers quietly contacted Lila, confirming Mercer had a habit of making racist remarks during roll call, jokes about robot kids and welfare tech. They wouldn't go on record, but they gave enough detail to paint a pattern. Then came the body cam footage. For weeks, the department claimed it was corrupted or under review. But a tech-savvy intern at the city's open records office, someone who'd seen Amari's story online, ran a recovery script on the backup drive. And there it was, 10 minutes of video showing Mercer approaching Amari, demanding her ID, then smirking as he unbuckled her prosthetics. Worse, audio captured him saying to his partner, "Let's see how she crawls without her fancy toys." The moment the footage leaked to Lila, everything changed. By noon, it was everywhere. News stations played the clip on loop. Social media exploded, not with trolls this time, but with outrage from veterans, doctors, engineers, parents. A retired Marine colonel posted, "I served with men like Elias Bellwether. This officer dishonors the badge." A prosthetist in Chicago wrote, "Those legs cost thousands. They're medical devices, not evidence. This was theft and cruelty." Elias watched the coverage from his living room, arms crossed. He wasn't celebrating. He knew how these things went. Public fury could burn bright, but it often faded fast. What mattered was what happened next. That afternoon, he put on his dress uniform, the one with the service medals pinned just so, and drove to police headquarters. He didn't call ahead, didn't ask for an appointment. He simply walked in, stood at the front desk and said, "I'd like to speak with Chief Dunleavy. It's urgent." The sergeant recognized him from the news. After a tense 5 minutes, the chief appeared, looking flustered. "Mr. Bellwether, Major," Elias corrected gently. "Retired, but the title sticks." The chief cleared his throat. "Of course. Please come in." Inside the office, Elias didn't sit. He stood near the window, back straight, voice calm but unwavering. "I served 22 years, he began. 2 tours overseas. I've held dying soldiers in my arms. I've followed orders I didn't agree with because I believed in the chain of command. But that belief requires trust. And right now, your department has broken that trust. Not just with me, but with every citizen who looks at a badge and wonders if it means protection. Or threat." He paused. The chief said nothing. "My daughter didn't just lose her legs that day," Elias continued. "She lost a piece of her safety in this city. And you have a choice now. You can circle the wagons around an officer who mocked a child while stealing her medical equipment. Or you can do what's right. Not for the cameras. Not for the headlines. But because it's your job." The chief shifted in his chair. "Internal Affairs is handling it." "Then let them handle it publicly," Elias said. "Release the full report. Charge him. Or I'll take this to federal court and I'll bring every journalist, every veteran group, every civil rights lawyer who's reached out to me. And I won't stop until someone answers for what happened to my child." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his words filled the room like thunder before lightning. That evening, Amari found him on the porch again, staring at the sky. She sat beside him without speaking. "Do you think he'll do it?" she finally asked. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I made sure he knows we're watching." The next day, the district attorney held a press conference. Standing beside Lila and NAACP leaders, she announced criminal charges against Officer Dale Mercer, unlawful detention, theft of medical devices, and violation of civil rights under color of law. It was rare, almost unheard of, for a local DA to press charges in a case like this. But the evidence was undeniable, and the public pressure was too loud to ignore. Amari watched the live stream from her bedroom, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When the DA said, No one is above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Later, Elias knocked on her door. "You okay?" She nodded. "It's not over, is it?" "No," he said. "But it's moving." That night she dreamed not of falling, but of walking through a hallway, a courtroom, a future where her legs were hers alone, and no one could take them without consequence. And for the first time, the dream felt possible. Weeks passed and the city settled into a strange kind of quiet. The headlines slowed. The protests thinned, but beneath the surface something was shifting. Officer Mercer had been formally charged, yes, but the police union still called it a witch hunt, and the department hadn't changed a single policy. Amari noticed it in small ways. The way store clerks watched her a little longer. The way some teachers avoided mentioning the incident, as if pretending it never happened would make it disappear. She wanted to move on, but the world kept reminding her that moving on wasn't the same as healing. Then her father did something unexpected. Instead of filing more complaints or giving more interviews, Elias started making phone calls not to lawyers or reporters but to people. A retired school counselor, a local pastor, a disability rights organizer who ran a youth mentorship program. He invited them all to a meeting at the community center and he asked Amari to come too. "I don't want to talk about it again," she said, arms crossed. "This isn't about talking," he told her. "It's about building." The night of the forum, the community center buzzed with energy. Folding chairs filled the room, some occupied by neighbors Amari had known her whole life, others by strangers holding clipboards and wearing lanyards from advocacy groups. 3 officers from the precinct sat near the back out of uniform, looking uneasy but present. Even Chief Dunleavy showed up, standing quietly by the door. Elias didn't stand at a podium. He just walked to the center of the room and said, "We're here because something broke. Not just trust, but understanding. And fixing it takes more than punishment. It takes connection." Then he turned and nodded to Amari. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't agreed to speak. But as she looked around, saw the faces waiting not with pity but with openness, she took a breath and stood. She didn't give a speech. She just told her truth. "I didn't think it would happen to me," she began, voice quiet but clear. "I study robotics. I get good grades. I recycle. I say please and thank you. I thought that was enough to be seen as normal." She paused. But that day none of that mattered. All he saw was a black girl with legs that looked different, and that made me suspicious. She talked about what her prosthetics meant, not as gadgets but as freedom. "They let me walk to school, run in gym class even if I'm slow, dance in my room when no one's watching. When he took them, it wasn't just my legs he took. It was my right to exist without being questioned." A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. One of the off-duty officers looked down at his hands. Amari didn't blame the whole department. She didn't call for revenge. She just asked for one thing: see us. Not as problems to be managed, but as people who belong here too. When she sat down, the room stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon the whole room rose, not in cheers, but in quiet, steady respect. Afterward, people came up to her. A mother with a son in a wheelchair said, "Thank you for saying what I've been too scared to." A young cop, barely older than Amari, whispered, "I didn't know it could feel like that. I'll do better." Even the chief approached, not with an excuse, but with a simple, "You deserved better. We'll listen." The forum didn't fix everything overnight, but it opened a door. Within days, a local engineering firm reached out. They'd seen Amari's story and wanted to collaborate on a project, designing affordable, customizable prosthetics for teens, created with input from users like her. Amari's eyes lit up for the first time in months. "We could make them modular," she told her dad that night, sketching ideas on a napkin. "So if one part breaks, you don't lose the whole leg. And maybe add sensors that log data, so doctors can adjust them remotely." Meanwhile, a GoFundMe campaign launched by Lila and the NAACP exploded. Donations poured in, from strangers, from schools, even from a prosthetics company in Germany. The goal had been $15,000 to cover replacement limbs and therapy. They raised over $180,000 in a week. Amari insisted most of it go toward a fund for other kids who couldn't afford adaptive tech. "If this helps even one person feel less alone," she said, "then it was worth it." But the biggest surprise came from within the police department itself. 3 officers, 2 veterans of the force, 1 newly promoted, stepped forward with sworn statements. They described Mercer's pattern, targeting black teens, making degrading comments about people with disabilities, even bragging about teaching lessons during stops. One admitted he'd stayed silent out of fear of retaliation. But after hearing that girl speak, he told Internal Affairs, "I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore." Their testimonies tipped the scales. The district attorney added a 4th charge, conspiracy to violate civil rights. Mercer's bail was revoked. He'd be tried in the fall. Through it all, Amari kept going to school. She rejoined robotics club. She started a lunchtime group called Adaptive Minds, where students with all kinds of disabilities shared ideas, frustrations, and dreams. Mateo helped her code a simple app that let users design 3D printable prosthetic covers. Some looked like galaxy swirls, others like circuit boards, one like a dragon scale. "Customization is dignity," Amari told the school paper. "It says, 'This is mine. This is me.'" Her father watched her rebuild piece by piece and felt a quiet pride that had nothing to do with medals or titles. This was different. This was her. One evening, as they sat on the porch again, Amari asked, "Do you think any of this will actually change things?" Elias thought for a long time. "Change isn't a single moment," he said. "It's 1,000 small choices. A cop who speaks up, a teacher who listens, a girl who refuses to be erased. You started something, Amari, and now others are picking it up." She smiled faintly. "I just wanted my legs back. You got them," he said. "And so much more." The next week, the city council announced a new partnership. Mandatory disability and anti-bias training for all officers, co-developed with Amari, Elias, and local advocacy groups. The curriculum would include real stories, not just policies. And Amari would help lead the first session. She was nervous, but also ready, because she'd learned something in the weeks since that awful afternoon on the curb. Her voice wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every kid who'd ever been made to feel less than, and she wouldn't let it go silent again. So when the day came, she walked into the training room not with anger but with purpose. Her new prosthetics hummed softly beneath her jeans. Calibrated to her stride, built to last, she stood at the front of the room, looked at the rows of officers in uniform and said simply, "Let's talk about what it means to see someone." Fully. And for the first time they listened. The courtroom was smaller than Amari expected. Pale wood panels, stiff chairs, a clock ticking too loudly above the judge's bench. She sat beside her father in the front row, hands folded in her lap, wearing the same navy blazer she'd worn to robotics nationals. Not because it was fancy, but because it made her feel like herself. Capable, focused, ready. Officer Mercer sat at the defense table, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. He hadn't looked at her once since the trial began. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he just didn't want to see the person he tried to erase. The verdict came on a Tuesday morning just after sunrise. Guilty on all counts: unlawful detention, theft of medical devices, violation of civil rights, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The judge called the actions a profound betrayal of public trust and sentenced Mercer to 3 years in state prison, plus a lifetime ban from law enforcement. There were no cheers in the courtroom. No dramatic outbursts. Just a quiet exhale from the people who'd shown up, neighbors, advocates, a few off-duty officers who'd testified. Amari didn't feel joy. Not exactly. What she felt was relief, like a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been set down. Outside, reporters waited, microphones raised. But Elias gently steered her away from the cameras. "You don't owe them a soundbite," he said. "You've already given enough." Back home, the house felt lighter. Not because it was over. Amari knew healing didn't work like that, but because the truth had been spoken and held and honored. That night, they ordered her favorite pizza, extra mushrooms, no olives, and watched an old sci-fi movie where the hero built a robot out of spare parts. Halfway through, Amari laughed at a dumb joke, and it didn't feel forced. It just felt real. In the weeks that followed, life didn't snap back to normal. Normal had changed. But in good ways. The city rolled out its new police training program, and Amari became a regular guest speaker. She didn't lecture. She shared stories about navigating stairs in prosthetics, about the panic of losing your mobility in public, about how being seen as suspicious wears on your soul over time. Officers listened. Some took notes. A few even apologized not for Mercer but for their own silence in the past. At school, adaptive minds grew. Kids from other districts started showing up. One boy came all the way from the next county just to talk to Amari about building a prosthetic hand that could hold a paintbrush. She stayed after school with him for 3 days straight, tweaking the grip mechanism until it worked. When he finally painted a sunflower, bright yellow, bold strokes, he hugged her so tight she nearly tipped over. "You made me feel possible," he whispered. She started saying yes to things she used to avoid. A state tech fair invited her to demo her prosthetic design. A university asked her to speak at a youth innovation summit. She even agreed to a short documentary, just 10 minutes, about young inventors with disabilities. She insisted it not be about the incident with the officer. "Tell the part where I build things," she told the filmmaker. "That's the story I want people to remember." Her father watched her step into this new version of herself with quiet awe. He still checked in, "You good?" over breakfast, a hand on her shoulder before a big event, but he didn't hover. He trusted her, and she trusted herself more now. One Saturday morning they drove to the VA hospital where Elias used to volunteer. Amari had an idea, a workshop for veteran amputees and teens with limb differences to design adaptive tools together. An older Marine with a prosthetic arm helped a 13-year-old girl code a voice-controlled wheelchair mount. A retired nurse showed Amari how to waterproof a socket for swimming. Ideas flowed like water. No one was inspiring. No one was brave. They were just people, solving problems side by side. Later, as they packed up, Elias said, "You know, I used to worry about protecting you from the world." Amari zipped her bag. "And now? Now I realize you're helping the world protect itself, from ignorance, from fear, from forgetting what dignity looks like." She smiled. "Guess we're both still serving." That summer, Amari submitted her prosthetic knee design to a national engineering competition. It wasn't the flashiest entry, but it was practical, affordable, and co-designed with input from over 24 users. When she won third place, the prize money went straight into the Adaptive Futures Fund, the nonprofit she and her dad quietly launched with leftover donations from the GoFundMe. The fund now helped cover therapy, tech repairs, and summer camps for kids with disabilities across 3 states. She still had hard days. Days when sirens made her flinch. Days when a stranger's stare sent her spiraling back to that curb. But now she had tools. Not just the ones she built, but the ones she'd gathered along the way. Friends who texted, "You good?" without being asked. Teachers who saved her a seat. A father who never let her forget her worth. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the yard, Amari asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if no one filmed it?" Elias was quiet for a long time. "I do," he said finally. "But I also believe that even if no one saw it, you'd still be you, and you'd still find a way to rise." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad someone saw." "Me too," he said. "But I'm prouder that you never stopped seeing yourself." Months later, Amari stood on a stage at the state capitol, testifying before a legislative committee on accessibility in public schools. She wore her favorite prosthetics, the ones with the galaxy-patterned covers, and spoke without notes. She talked about ramps that didn't exist, labs with desks too high, buses that couldn't accommodate mobility devices. She didn't ask for pity. She asked for partnership. Afterward, a young lawmaker approached her. "You changed my mind today," she said. "I thought we'd done enough." "Clearly we haven't." Amari just nodded. "We're not asking for special treatment. Just a fair chance to walk through the same doors everyone else does." Back home, she found a letter in the mail. It was from a girl in Ohio, 12 years old, born without her right leg, who'd seen the documentary. "You made me believe I can be an engineer too," she wrote. "I named my new prosthetic Nova." Amari taped the letter to her bedroom wall right next to her robotics blueprints. Life wasn't perfect. Systems were still slow. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight. But something had shifted, not just in policies but in people, and in herself. She walked now with a different kind of strength, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that endures, the kind that builds, the kind that says, "I'm here, I belong, and I won't be erased." And every step she took, click, clack, steady and sure, was a quiet promise to every kid who'd ever been told they didn't fit. You do. And I'll help you find your way.